They had planned this trip for months. Two sisters, standing at the airport check-in counter with matching luggage and mismatched excitement levels. Naomi, the older one, calm and collected, checking their documents for the third time. Layla, fresh out of university, practically bouncing on her heels, her graduation gift finally here. A week in Paris, just the two of them. The morning had started perfectly. They'd arrived at the airport 3 hours early, because Naomi believed in being prepared for everything. Their documents were impeccable: passports, tickets, hotel confirmations, even their itinerary printed in triplicate. Layla had laughed at her sister's over-preparation, but Naomi had simply smiled and said, "Better safe than sorry." They wore their travel outfits with pride. Naomi in her crisp blazer and comfortable yet stylish pants, Layla in her new dress bought specifically for this trip. They looked like what they were: successful, educated young women ready to explore the world. The queue at the check-in counter moved slowly, but they didn't mind. They had time. They chatted about their plans: the Louvre on Tuesday, Versailles on Wednesday, that little cafe Naomi had read about in a travel blog. Layla kept taking selfies, documenting every moment. "Our first international trip together," she captioned one, showing both their beaming faces. When their turn came, Naomi handed over their documents with practiced efficiency. The check-in agent, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, took them without looking up. She typed something into her computer, then typed again. A frown crossed her face. She looked up at them, then back at her screen. Then she did something that made Naomi's stomach tighten. She caught the eye of her colleague at the next counter. A silent communication passed between them. The colleague glanced over at Naomi and Layla, then quickly looked away. "Is there a problem?" Naomi asked, keeping her voice level. The agent didn't answer immediately. Instead, she raised her hand, a subtle signal. Within moments, a supervisor appeared. A man in his 40s with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned over the agent's shoulder, looking at the screen. They whispered something Naomi couldn't catch. The supervisor straightened up, that cold smile fixed on his face like it had been painted there. "I'm sorry, ladies, but there seems to be a problem with your booking." Naomi felt Layla tense beside her. "What kind of problem?" Naomi asked. "We booked these tickets 2 months ago. We have the confirmation right here." She pulled out her phone, showing the confirmation email, the booking reference, everything. The supervisor barely glanced at it. "Yes, I see that, but our system is showing an issue. If you could just step aside while we sort this out." That's when Naomi heard it. The couple at the next counter. Same flight, same type of tickets, being cleared through with cheerful efficiency. "Have a wonderful flight to Paris," the agent told them. No system issues there. A family of 4 approached the counter they just vacated. Same flight. Naomi watched as they were processed smoothly, their boarding passes printing without incident. The contrast was impossible to miss. "What exactly is the issue with our booking?" Naomi pressed, her voice firmer now. The supervisor's smile grew thinner. "As I said, we're looking into it. Please step aside." They had no choice but to move, pulling their luggage to the side while other passengers streamed past them. Layla was trying to stay positive. "Maybe it's just a computer glitch," she said, but even she didn't sound convinced. 20 minutes passed. 30. Other passengers for their flight had all checked in. Naomi approached the counter again. This time, the supervisor saw her coming and his expression hardened. "We're still investigating," he said before she could speak. "Investigating what?" "We have valid tickets. We've done nothing wrong." Please be patient." But patience was wearing thin. They could see their flight status on the board. Boarding would begin soon. Naomi made a decision. "Come on," she told Layla. "We'll sort this out at the gate." They went through security. No problems there. Their documents were valid, their luggage clean. The security staff were professional, efficient. Whatever issue the airline claimed to have found, airport security didn't see it. At the gate, hope flickered briefly. Maybe it had all been a misunderstanding. Maybe the gate agents would be more helpful. But as they approached the gate desk, Naomi saw the agent there receive a phone call. The agent's eyes flicked to them, then away. When they reached the desk, the agent's expression was already set in stone. "I'm sorry, but I've been informed you won't be boarding this flight." The words hit like a physical blow. Layla's hand found Naomi's arm, gripping tight. "Why?" Naomi demanded. "What possible reason could there be?" "There's a security concern." "What security concern?" "We just passed through security. They found no issues." "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics." "This is ridiculous. We have valid tickets. We've done nothing wrong. You can't just refuse us boarding without a reason." The agent's expression didn't change. "You can wait aside. We're not letting you on this flight." The boarding announcement came over the speakers. First class and priority passengers. Business class. Then economy. Passengers lined up, showed their boarding passes, walked onto the jet bridge. Naomi and Layla stood there, watching their dream trip board without them. That's when Naomi saw it. Layla's eyes welling up with tears. Her little sister, who'd worked so hard, graduated with honors, who'd been so excited about this trip. This was supposed to be her celebration. Naomi pulled out her phone. If they wanted to play games, she'd document everything. She started recording, catching the agent's dismissive tone, the supervisor returning with the same non-answers, the other passengers boarding without issue. Some of those passengers noticed what was happening. A few looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. One elderly woman paused, seemed about to say something, then hurried onto the plane. A young man filmed briefly on his own phone before being told to move along by gate staff. "You need to put that away," the supervisor told Naomi, indicating her phone. "I'm within my rights to record in a public space. Not if you're creating a disturbance. The only disturbance here is you refusing to let us board our flight without valid reason." Before we continue with this incredible story, if you're finding value in this narrative, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more powerful stories like this one. The supervisor's face darkened. I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the gate area. I want to speak to a manager. A real manager. Someone who can actually tell us what's going on. I am the manager on duty." "Then I want to speak to your superior." The supervisor pulled out his radio. But instead of calling for a superior, his next words chilled Naomi to the bone. "Security to gate B7. 2 security guards appeared within minutes. Large men in dark uniforms, hands resting on their equipment belts. They positioned themselves strategically, not quite surrounding the sisters but making their presence impossible to ignore. "Ladies, we're going to need you to come with us," one of them said. "Are we being detained?" Naomi asked, her legal knowledge kicking in. "On what grounds?" "No one's being detained. We just need to resolve this away from the gate area." The plane was nearly fully boarded now. Through the windows, they could see passengers settling into their seats, putting bags in overhead compartments, living the journey that should have been theirs. That's when Layla, quiet Layla who always avoided confrontation, did something unexpected. She pulled out her phone and made a call. "Mum," she said, her voice trembling. "We're at the airport. They won't let us board." Naomi hadn't wanted to involve their mother. Dr. Angela Cole had enough on her plate. As CEO of Meridian Corporate Holdings, she managed a portfolio of companies worth billions. She didn't need to be bothered with this. But Layla was past caring about bothering anyone. "They say there's a security concern, but they won't tell us what. They're treating us like criminals, Mum. Other people with the same tickets are boarding fine. It's just us they're stopping." Naomi couldn't hear their mother's response, but she saw the change in Layla's expression. Her sister's hand steadied. Her chin lifted slightly. "She wants to talk to them," Layla said, holding out the phone. The supervisor shook his head. "I'm not taking calls from passengers' family members." Layla turned the phone to speaker. And that's when everyone in the vicinity heard Dr. Angela Cole's voice. A voice that had commanded boardrooms, that had negotiated billion-dollar deals, that had never, ever backed down from a fight. This is Dr. Angela Cole. Put me on with whoever's in charge. Now. The supervisor smirked. I don't care who you are. Your daughters are not boarding this flight. There was a pause. Then Angela's voice came through again, colder than Arctic wind. What's your name? I don't have to. Your name. Unless you want me to have it pulled from the employee records of Skyline Airways, which, by the way, is a subsidiary of Atlas Aviation Group, in which Meridian Corporate Holdings owns a 42% stake. The supervisor's smirk faltered. That's what? My company, Meridian Corporate Holdings, is the largest shareholder in your parent company, which makes me, effectively, your boss's boss's boss. Now, your name. The color drained from the supervisor's face. I'm going to need to make some calls. You do that. And while you're at it, get me Richard Steinberg on the line. He's your Chief Operations Officer. Tell him Angela Cole wants to discuss why her daughters are being racially profiled at his airport. The supervisor actually staggered. We're not. This isn't about. Isn't it? 2 young black women with valid tickets, clear security checks, and no criminal records are being denied boarding while white passengers with identical tickets are walking onto that plane. What would you call it? The security guards exchanged glances. One of them quietly spoke into his radio, calling for a superior. The other passengers who hadn't boarded yet were openly staring now. Several had their phones out, recording. The supervisor hurried away, his phone pressed to his ear. Naomi could see him gesturing frantically as he talked. The gate agent looked lost, unsure what to do without her supervisor there. Mum, Naomi said, taking the phone from Layla. You don't have to. I'm already in the car, Angela cut her off. I'll be there in 15 minutes. You don't have to come here. Yes, I do. They touched my children. They made my baby girl cry. They think they can humiliate you without consequences. They're about to learn differently. The next few minutes were surreal. The supervisor returned, his face now shiny with sweat. Behind him came another man in a better suit, clearly higher management. Then another. Within 10 minutes, there was a cluster of airline officials at the gate, all on their phones, all looking increasingly panicked. One of them, the man in the better suit, approached Naomi and Layla. Ladies, I'm James Morrison, Senior Vice President of Customer Relations. I understand there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Naomi's voice was sharp. Is that what you're calling it? We're looking into what happened here. In the meantime, we'd like to offer you. We don't want offers. We want to board our flight. The flight we paid for. The flight we have tickets for. Morrison's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and his face went pale. Excuse me, I need to take this. He stepped away, and Naomi could hear him saying, Yes, Mr. Steinberg. Yes, sir. I understand, sir. The plane, which had been preparing to push back from the gate, suddenly stopped. The jet bridge, which had been retracted, started extending again. Passengers on board were looking out the windows, confused. Then Naomi heard it, the sound of rapid footsteps, high heels clicking against the terminal floor with purpose and fury. Dr. Angela Cole had arrived. She swept into view like a force of nature. Immaculate in her business suit, her presence immediately commanded attention. But it wasn't just her. Behind her came several people, airport security officials, what looked like senior airport management, and surprisingly, at least 2 people who were clearly journalists, one with a camera. Angela didn't even glance at the airline officials. She went straight to her daughters, pulling them both into a brief, fierce hug. Are you all right? We're fine, Mum, Layla said, though her voice was thick with unshed tears. Only then did Angela turn to face the airline representatives. The temperature in the gate area seemed to drop 20 degrees. Mr. Morrison, she said, recognizing the senior VP. I believe we met at the Aviation Industry Gala last year. You were quite proud then of Skyline's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Interesting way of showing it. Morrison started to speak, but Angela raised her hand. I don't want to hear excuses. I don't want to hear about misunderstandings. I want to know why my daughters, Dr. Naomi Cole, who holds a PhD in international relations, and Layla Cole, who just graduated summa cum laude from university, were denied boarding on your flight. Dr. Cole, if we could discuss this privately. Oh, we're well past private discussions. You made this public when you humiliated my children in front of a gate full of passengers. When you called security on them like they were criminals. When you refused them service based on nothing more than the color of their skin. We never. What was the security concern, Mr. Morrison? What exactly triggered your system? Because I've already had my legal team pull up their booking. Clean passport records. No flags. No warnings. Nothing except 2 young black women daring to fly first class to Paris. The journalists were recording everything. Passengers on the plane were pressed against the windows. Social media was already exploding. Someone had live-streamed part of the confrontation, and the hashtags were spreading like wildfire. Angela pulled out her phone. Mr. Steinberg? Yes, I'm here at the gate. No, this is not acceptable. She listened for a moment. I don't care if the flight is delayed. In fact, I insist on it. That plane doesn't move until my daughters receive a formal, public apology and are seated in the first-class seats they paid for. Morrison's phone rang again. His face, already pale, went nearly transparent. He listened, nodded repeatedly, then hung up. Dr. Cole, he said, his voice strained. Mr. Steinberg has authorized me to offer your daughters our sincerest apologies. There was clearly an error in how this situation was handled. An error. Angela's voice could have cut glass. Is that what we're calling racial profiling now? We don't. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Mr. Morrison. First, you're going to apologize to my daughters. Properly. Publicly. On the record. Second, they're going to board that plane and fly to Paris as planned. Third, by the time they land, Skyline Airways will have issued a public statement acknowledging what happened here and committing to immediate anti-bias training for all staff. And fourth, we're going to have a very serious conversation about Meridian's continued investment in Atlas Aviation Group. The CEO of the airport had arrived now, looking flustered. The plane's captain appeared in the jet bridge doorway, trying to understand why his flight was being held. The scene had become a complete circus, all because 2 qualified passengers had been denied their rights. Morrison looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him. Ladies, he said, turning to Naomi and Layla. On behalf of Skyline Airways, I want to offer our deepest, most sincere apologies. What happened here was wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. You should never have been treated this way. Louder, Angela said. Make sure everyone hears it. Morrison raised his voice, addressing not just the sisters but the entire gate area. Skyline Airways apologizes unreservedly to Dr. Naomi Cole and Ms. Layla Cole for the unacceptable treatment they received today. They will be boarding immediately, and we will be conducting a full investigation into how this happened. But Angela wasn't done. The supervisor who started this. Where is he? The supervisor was brought forward, looking like he might be sick. Apologize, Angela commanded. I'm sorry, he mumbled. For what? For the misunderstanding. Try again. For what? The supervisor swallowed hard. For treating you unfairly. For making assumptions. For discriminating against you. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Someone in the crowd started clapping. Then others joined in. Soon, there was a wave of applause from the waiting passengers, from the other gate agents who'd been watching in horror, even from some of the security guards. Here's a question for you watching this. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling? Share your story in the comments below. The gate agent, with shaking hands, printed new boarding passes for Naomi and Layla. But these weren't just any boarding passes. They'd been upgraded to the airline's most premium seats, though neither sister had asked for that. As they prepared to board, the airline's PR had arrived, practically running, her phone already out as she tried to manage the crisis that was unfolding on social media. The hashtags #SistersDeniedFlight and #CO were trending. The livestream had been shared thousands of times. Major news outlets were already calling for statements. Angela walked her daughters to the jet bridge entrance. "Enjoy Paris," she said, kissing each of them on the cheek. "And if anyone else gives you trouble, you call me immediately." "Mum," Naomi said quietly, "you didn't have to do all this." Angela's expression softened for just a moment. "Yes, I did. Because every time we let these things slide, every time we accept the humiliation quietly, we make it easier for them to do it to someone else's children. Someone who might not have the power to fight back." As Naomi and Layla walked onto the plane, the flight attendants were waiting for them. The chief purser herself escorted them to their seats, apologizing repeatedly. The other passengers, who had witnessed everything through the windows, watched them with a mixture of respect and sympathy. Several nodded in acknowledgement. One woman reached out and squeezed Layla's hand as she passed. Their seats were in the very front of the first-class cabin. Champagne was immediately offered. The captain himself came out to apologize personally. But even with all the special treatment, both sisters could feel the weight of what had happened. As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, nearly 2 hours late, Layla turned to her sister. "Do you think things will actually change?" Naomi looked out the window, where she could still see their mother standing in the terminal, watching their plane. Angela Cole, who had built an empire, who commanded respect in boardrooms around the world, who had just brought an airline to its knees to protect her children. "Mum didn't just raise us," Layla continued, echoing what she would later say. "She raised a standard." The plane lifted off, carrying them toward Paris, toward the celebration they'd planned. But both sisters knew the real victory had already been won on the ground. Their mother had turned their humiliation into a teaching moment for an entire industry. By the time they landed in Paris, the story had gone global. Skyline Airways had issued a comprehensive statement admitting fault and announcing mandatory anti-bias training for all staff. The supervisor who had initiated the incident had been suspended pending investigation. Several other airlines proactively announced reviews of their own procedures. But perhaps the most powerful moment came later, when a young black woman approached them in the Paris airport. "I saw what happened," she said. "My family has flown that route dozens of times. We've felt it, that look, that suspicion, that extra scrutiny. But we never had the power to do anything about it. Thank you for standing up. Thank your mother for standing up." That was when both sisters truly understood what their mother had done. It wasn't just about them. It wasn't even just about one flight or one airline. It was about every person who'd been made to feel less than human because of the color of their skin, every traveler who'd been subjected to extra scrutiny, every family who'd been humiliated but had no recourse, and legal threats. Instead, she chose to make it public, to shine a light on what so many travelers of color experience regularly. Dr. Angela Cole had resources, connections, and power. But more importantly, she had the courage to use them. She could have handled things quietly, behind closed doors, with phone calls and legal threats. Instead, she chose to make it public, to shine a light on what so many travelers of color experience regularly. The ripple effects continued for months. The incident became a case study in business schools about crisis management and corporate responsibility. It sparked conversations in boardrooms about diversity, equity, and inclusion that went beyond mere lip service. Several airlines revised their training programs. The airport implemented new procedures for handling passenger complaints. The supervisor who had started it all eventually gave an interview, admitting he had made assumptions based on unconscious bias. He claimed he hadn't realized what he was doing at the time, but the incident had forced him to confront his own prejudices. Whether his remorse was genuine or motivated by the loss of his job was debatable, but the conversation it sparked was valuable nonetheless. For Naomi and Layla, the Paris trip became something more than a graduation celebration. It became a reminder that standing up for what's right isn't always easy or comfortable. That sometimes, making noise is necessary. That privilege, when you have it, should be used to protect those who don't. They spent their week in Paris visiting museums and cafes as planned, but also speaking via video calls to news outlets, sharing their story, making sure the momentum didn't die. They received thousands of messages from people around the world sharing similar experiences, thanking them for bringing attention to an issue that affects so many. When they returned home, their mother was waiting at the airport, the same airport where it had all happened. But this time, the treatment was very different. Airline staff went out of their way to be helpful. Security was professional and respectful. It shouldn't have taken a public shaming for basic decent treatment, but at least it was a start. Later, in a quiet moment at home, Angela shared something with her daughters. "I've faced discrimination my entire career," she said. "In boardrooms where I was the only woman, the only black person. In negotiations where people assumed I was the assistant, not the CEO. I've had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But I never wanted you to face the same battles." "But we will, Mum," Naomi said gently. "You know we will." "Yes," Angela agreed. "But now you've seen that you don't have to face them alone. And you don't have to face them quietly." The airline industry did change, incrementally but measurably. Studies conducted a year later showed improvements in how passengers of color were treated. It wasn't perfect. Systemic racism doesn't disappear overnight, but it was progress. And it had started with two sisters who just wanted to celebrate a graduation, and a mother who refused to let injustice stand. The story became legend in certain circles, the day a CEO shut down a flight to defend her daughters. But for the Cole family, it was simply a reminder of what Angela had always taught them. That dignity isn't negotiable, that respect is non-negotiable, and that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be silent. The supervisor never returned to his position. The airline implemented new policies. The social media storm eventually died down. But in boardrooms and break rooms, in training sessions and travel forums, the story lived on. A cautionary tale for some, an inspiration for others, but most importantly, a reminder that discrimination has consequences, especially when you target the children of someone with the power and courage to fight back. As Angela had said that day at the airport, they touched her children. They made her baby girl cry. They thought they could humiliate two young black women without consequences. They learned differently. And hopefully, through their very public education, others learned too. The next time someone at that airline saw a young black woman traveling alone or with family, maybe they'd think twice before making assumptions. Maybe they'd remember the day Dr. Angela Cole brought their operations to a standstill. Maybe they'd treat that traveler with the respect they deserved from the start. Change doesn't always come in grand gestures or sweeping legislation. Sometimes it comes from individuals refusing to accept the unacceptable. From mothers protecting their children. From sisters standing together. From a family that raised not just successful children, but a standard that says discrimination is never acceptable, that dignity is always worth fighting for, and that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. The Cole sisters did eventually get their Paris vacation. They saw the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre. They ate croissants and walked along the Seine. But what they remembered most from that trip wasn't the tourist attractions. It was the moment their mother walked into that airport terminal, head held high, ready to take on an entire industry for her children. That was the real lesson. Not just that discrimination is wrong. They'd always known that. But that fighting it requires courage, resources, and sometimes, the willingness to make a scene. To refuse to go quietly. To demand better, not just for yourself but for everyone who comes after. The flight that was delayed for 2 hours that day carried more than just passengers to Paris. It carried a message that the days of quiet discrimination, of subtle racism disguised as security concerns or system errors, were numbered. That people were watching, recording, sharing. That actions have consequences. And for every person who's ever been made to feel small because of who they are, the story served as a reminder. You deserve better. You deserve respect. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you have someone in your corner willing to shut down an entire flight to make sure you get it.